There we are. Hi everybody, and welcome to TMI Live number 17, live from the scriptorium, where I am making an inventory of the library of Marshall McLuhan week by week for a few hours every Tuesday evening, and I'm pleased to have you with me here. So the last weeks I've been doing kind of theme shows, and I hadn't meant to, it just turned out that way, so I was determined to just do my boring book thing today. Some things came up, so first I'm going to just reduce this stack a little bit. So for those who haven't seen before, what I'm doing is I'm making an inventory of this 6,000 or so volume library. And I'm just making a note of everything that's in here for present and future reference. This is something I did years ago for Marshall's library, and it's proved very handy. So I'm doing it for Eric's as well. I'm still in the reference section here. This is a Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 3rd edition. Hardcover, it's in good condition. It's a nice little edition, actually. London, George Bell & Sons, 1923. So I make a note of the bare bibliographic data, and I also note oftentimes Dad signed his name and where he picked up the book. Marshall did the same thing, and is really handy because it gives you a bit of insight into how this library came together. I've been learning so much about libraries doing this. A library is a really interesting thing. It's not just filled with books. It's its own little wonderful or big wonderful. I don't even know what to call it. It's not inert, you know. And I've said this before. It's like a living thing. And I know people will maybe roll their eyes and want me to break out the tinfoil hat or whatever, but this library in particular seems to serve up the most interesting things no matter where you look, and it's so weird how apropos it can be. It's hard for me to explain that, but so what I'm doing is I'm looking for a name and a date and then an indication of annotation. And I'll make a note of the sorts of annotations that are there, if they are there. There's nothing here except a nice old book. I'll set that aside. Welcome. Thanks for being here. A couple of things I wanted to point out. We're streaming this on Facebook, so presumably you're a member of the McLuhan Institute Facebook page, and you know about this stack of books here. You know, someday I'll get a proper camera and everything won't be backwards. Anyway, about this stack of books, I'm auctioning them off to benefit our local library. You can see a post on the page about that. There are 10 books, McLuhan books from our archive and bookstore. The bookstore is ericmcluhan.com/bookstore if you're interested. They were originally being auctioned off at the library's auction, but nobody bid on them, which was slightly embarrassing and horrifying. So I thought I've got 700 sort of people on this page, and maybe one of you would like it. It's a pretty good start to a McLuhan library. So email me, andrew@themcluhaninstitute.com. They're worth somewhere around $750, believe it or not, when you add it up. I've already had one expression of interest and one solid bid, not for a lot though, and I'm going to close the contest next Monday at midnight. So you have the better part of a week if you want to make a bid. Your bid will include the cost of shipping the books to you. I'm providing the books. So please help me support our local library. The Picton Library is making an amazing $2 million expansion, and I really want to help them out. So help me help them, please. That's that. So I'm almost done this dictionary reference section, thank goodness, because it's a little bit tedious. And I was looking ahead, as I do. And if you want to go over to the Instagram, McLuhan Institute Instagram, you'll see a picture of the shelf, which is next, and the books that are on top. And this is pretty neat. On top, there's a Reader's Digest, July 1981, that has a sort of remembering McLuhan, The Man and the Mystique by Harry J. Boyle, which is nice. And then it has the Humanities Association Bulletin, Fall 1961, which includes The Humanities in the Electronic Age by Marshall McLuhan, which is the text or transcript of a lecture given the annual meeting of the Humanities Association of Canada held in Montreal, June 1961, which is very interesting. And I'll just read you the last paragraph. Yet today as never before, the task of the humanities is to keep clear and lively the modes of discourse and the forms of mental life. More than ever before, humanists are called on to understand many new languages born of the new forms and new knowledge. Nor will these new languages obviate the older ones. Jet travel and satellite broadcasting will foster the grasp of languages, ancient and modern, in a simultaneous cultural transparency. The concept of history of the philosopher Heidegger recommends itself as a natural model for the humanities in the electric age. It is the idea of the poetic of history as a kind of unified language, the inner key to the creation of which can be grasped by a deepening sense of the spiritual energy encompassed in the ceaselessly growing life of words. The ideal marriage of Mercury and philology, of spiritual values and perfected method, will be consummated, if ever, in the electronic age. He was a little bit of a optimist, I think, in a way, although he liked to say he was an apocalyptist, neither an optimist nor a pessimist. Then there's this odd little tract, The Great Illusion. Is the United States the greatest and most powerful nation in the world? Bizarre little thing I won't get into, because I do try to keep these things to 15 minutes, just because I'm trying to get work done and I'm trying to feed you the interesting bits. And speaking of interesting bits, does anybody know shorthand? If you're familiar with shorthand and are in the Prince Edward County area or feel like traveling to this area, this is a project for you. This is pretty cool. It blows my mind the kinds of things I come across here. So this is a stack of spiral bound notebooks. They look pretty basic. But what they are, well, I mean, they're notebooks and they're full of notes. And they're mostly shorthand. But I didn't go through every one, but note at the top here is October 4th, 78. So 1978, I saw another one, 1979. I think 79. Anyway, these are notes, I believe, from Marshall McLuhan's secretary, and a lot of them are it's a dictation. That's why it's shorthand, and letters to people. To Virginia Quarterly, Eric's article. Roger Poole, University of Ottawa. To Columbia University, to Buckner, to Dr. Williamson, LOM, Laws of Media, to someone here, dyslexia, to someone, RE, someone else, followed by, okay, so shorthand is a funny thing, but then there are these little words in here. Clarify ambiguities at the bottom. Virginia Woolf to the lighthouse. Ram notes in between. Walter J. Ong, S.J. Be really, really cool to know. Oh, here's another thing. There's Heidegger. Be really cool to, what's the word? What is the word for translating, transcribing shorthand? Anyway, that's what these all are. Notes, notebooks from Marshall's secretary, which is pretty awesome. Most of what didn't end up in the National Archives in Ottawa, or more recently, 10 or so years ago, the University of Toronto Fisher Rare Book Library, is here. And I'm doing my best to make note of it and share it and see what we can do with it, because there's some very interesting things. Anyway, MA thesis on Marshall. I imagine there's a lot of really neat stuff in here, but it would take it's a whole little project. This is basically a building full of projects. Comic epitaphs from the very best old graveyards. The library has a sense of humor. She lived with her husband 50 years and died in the confident hope of a better life. Well, there's a bookmark in here, and it is actually a obituary page. And we didn't do a gravestone for Dad, but we should. He would probably appreciate if we made a joke of it, but I'm not sure anybody else would go for that idea. So I'm going to continue my inventory for a minute. We're just about at 15 minutes, so I'll let you go for now. Not the most exciting, or maybe it is the most exciting TMI Live, but that's the whole kind of joke about doing a live broadcast of a book inventory. Thank you very much for being here. Follow us, follow the McLuhan Institute on Instagram to follow along stuff that I find, because I don't post it all on Facebook. Also on Twitter, and think about books. I'd love to send them to you. Thanks a lot. Good night.